If you've been thinking about getting into real estate, but you don't know where to start, or you're just too chicken right now to jump into the game, then just watch this video, because I'm going to show you the easiest way to get into it. Well, I'll take that back. It's not really the easiest way, but it is the simplest way. And simple doesn't always mean easy. So you do got to put in the work. Step one, if you want to get into real estate, is you need to assess your financial situation. Wherever you are in your financial journey, you need to know where you are in the process of getting pre-approved, right? So you won't know what you qualify for unless you go speak to a lender. So in this instance, the very first thing that you're gonna do, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter what your credit score is, you need to go find a lender. And you can find a lender on Google. You could go down to Chase, Bank of America, any credit union, anywhere. Any bank will show you where you need to go to speak to a lender, or they'll just have a lender on site. So once you do that, the lender's gonna want to, well, first you're gonna ask them for your pre-approval. Meaning you're gonna go in there and you're gonna ask for a pre-approval letter because you wanna buy a house. They're gonna ask you questions, which is credit score, how much money you make, all of that crap. Just go ahead and do it. They're gonna do a hard credit pull. And I don't understand why people are always scared of hard credit pulls. It does not matter. Your credit score might drop a few points. It'll come back in like 6 months or so. It really doesn't matter. Just do what you gotta do. It's not that important. I don't know why people are always worried about it. I have a lot of friends that never want people to do a hard inquiry. It doesn't matter. Run it, and then you're gonna get a pre-approval letter telling you how much money you qualify for. The alternative is they do a hard credit pull, and next thing you know, your lender tells you that you don't qualify for anything. And that may very well happen. But for this case, we're gonna assume that you don't have a lot of money. We're gonna assume that your credit score really sucks, and you went to the lender and the lender said, hey buddy, you don't qualify for anything. And in reality, once you start telling them what your financial situation is, they'll tell you if you qualify or if you're not gonna qualify. Most likely they won't even do a hard inquiry if they know that you don't qualify. But you're not really going for the pre-approval letter anyways, because in this situation, we're gonna assume that you don't really have your finances in order. So what they're gonna give you is information, and you need that information. That's gonna be data, and that's gonna basically be the guidelines that you're gonna use to acquire this property. This is what's gonna tell you that you need to work on. So you don't know that you have a problem until you acknowledge that there's a problem. The lender will tell you what your problems are. So now you have information that you can use to better your situation. Step number two is you're gonna need to position yourself. So step one, you acquired all the information that you needed to know what you needed to work on. And step two, you're gonna make a timeline and you're gonna start working on your situation to make sure that you're in the best position that you can be to afford a property. And there's a few things that you're gonna have to do here. The first thing that you're gonna need to do is you're gonna need to boost your income. So for this example, we're assuming that you don't make a lot of money, your credit score is bad, and all of those other things that many people struggle with. So go and get a job. There is no reason why you should only be working 40 hours. Okay, like if your goal is to buy a house, you need to be working 60, 70, 80 hours. Put in the work. And I know a lot of people are turned off by hard work, but you're not, because you're different. And you're doing whatever it is that you need to do to achieve your goal. So find any job that you can. It doesn't matter what it is. Just go out there and make some money. Even if it is just dishwashing, you're gonna love dishwashing. Or not, it doesn't really matter. Because you're not doing it for the love of the job, you're doing it for the love of money. Because money is gonna get you a house, which is gonna get you more money. So just go ahead, suck it up. You don't have to do it forever. You just have to do it for a period of time, maybe a few years, whatever it is. Or if you find a second job that you don't like, that's fine. Go ahead, keep working until you acquire your second property or your first property. And then once you move on to your second property, you can go ahead and switch your jobs. And there's other little details that go in with that, because if you do leave a job, most of the times you're gonna have to make sure that you stay within the same industry, because some banks don't like when you switch industries, and they'll want you to be there for at least 2 years. But don't worry about the nitty-gritty. Just go out there and make money. Step number two, reduce your debt. And by debt, I don't mean credit card payments or your credit card debt. Even though that is important, you don't want that to be out of control. And if it is under control, you're gonna wanna go ahead and take care of that. Ideally, I mean installment payments. So anything like car notes, or I don't know, that Best Buy laptop that you finance, you're gonna want that. You're gonna want to get that paid off. those things are going to affect your debt to income ratio. So you want to make sure that that is as low as possible. You want your money to be as high as it possibly can be, and you want your debt to be as low as it can be. The next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that your credit score is where it needs to be. So if your credit score sucks, improve it. And if your credit score is good, maintain it. Your credit score is your lifeline. From this moment forward, your credit score is your lifeline. Just get that through your head. The last thing that you're going to need to do is increase your savings. So make sure that all the money that you have in savings or all the money that you're making is traceable, because the bank likes money that can be traced. It doesn't mean that it's gonna disqualify you from getting the house, but it is gonna make it a whole lot difficult, and in some cases it will disqualify you from getting the house. So don't go out and sell, maybe I probably shouldn't say that for YouTube. Don't go out there and sell things that you know you shouldn't be selling, and then taking that cash and putting it under your mattress, and then think that once it's time to buy a house, you can just pull that cash from under the mattress and you're gonna be able to pay from the house. That is a big no-no, because it's not gonna help you. And I know people that think like this. Some people probably hear me say that, they think that I'm probably crazy, but there are people out there that really do think like this, and my stepfather is one of those people. He keeps all his money under a mattress because he's scared that the government one day is gonna go defunct, and then he thinks that cash is actually gonna help him. Anyways, that's a side rant. Save money. So you're gonna need to cut down on your expenses. Stop going out to Starbucks, stop going out to Dunkin'. Go ahead and make your own coffee at home, all that good stuff that you hear from other people. Reduce your expenses, only buy things that are essential. One of my recommendations would be if you can rent a room. So if you're renting, instead of renting an apartment, because some people feel like they can't live with other people, you're not those people anymore. Now you're gonna go look for a room. And if you're already having a one-bedroom apartment, maybe see if you can rent out the living room. Maybe you live in the living room and then somebody else lives in the room. I did this. I actually don't recommend that. Me personally, most people won't do this, but me personally, if I once had a one-bedroom apartment and I rented out the living room to a friend and I lived in the room, and it was a hideous living arrangement. It was a 600 square foot apartment. It was crazy. I don't recommend that people live like that. But if you can rent out a room, go on Facebook Marketplace. They typically have a lot of rooms that are for rent. Go ahead and rent the room. It's going to reduce your expenses. It's going to split your expenses amongst other people, so utilities will be split with whoever else lives in there. I think that is a great way to get ahead. I think that is the most underrated way to actually get ahead in life. It is to live with other people and save as much money as you can. So those are the 4 things that you're going to have to do. That is boost your income, reduce your debt, installment payments, very important, get rid of them if you can, enhance your credit score or maintain it, because that is your lifeline. And lastly, increase your savings, because you're gonna need that for a down payment once you go purchase your first property. Now, you have everything in order. You came back, let's say a year later after speaking to your lender, and now you have fixed your credit score, you have money in the bank, you're making more money from your main job and your side job. So now it's time for step number 3, and you go back to your lender and get that pre-approval letter. So your lender, the first time you went to them, gave you a list of things that you need to work on. You worked on them. Now you're back and you want a pre-approval letter because you want to know how much money you can or how much house you can afford. Once your lender gives you the pre-approval letter, it's gonna have a dollar amount. That dollar amount is how much house the lender determined that you can afford. So you're gonna wanna go find a realtor, and if you don't know any realtors, your lender will have several realtors that they work with or that they know. Use one of theirs, or if you have any friends, go ask them if they know anybody that's a realtor, because realtors are in abundance in today's society. There's as many realtors as there are drug dealers. If you can find a drug dealer down the corner, you can find a realtor. Matter of fact, go ahead and ask your drug dealer if he knows a realtor, and go ahead and use them. Once you find a realtor, you're gonna wanna search for modest homes. Your realtor is most of the time gonna want you to buy the more expensive property. If you qualify for $300,000 in house, they're probably gonna try and push you to $300,000. Don't listen to them. Always go for what you feel comfortable, because the house that you buy, you're gonna wanna make sure that you're able to afford the payments, even though you're not gonna technically be making all those payments. But you want it to be a modest house. You don't want the house to be too big. You don't want it to eat up all of your income. You just don't put yourself in a bad situation. A lot of people end up buying more than they can afford, or think there's a lot of problems with buying a house that's too big, especially in this strategy. Don't do it. Go for like a 2-1.5 house, a 2 bedroom, maybe a 3-1 or 3-2. Ideally, I prefer to have more than one bathroom. I think having more than one bathroom is the most important thing, and that was an advice that was given to me by my mentor when I was younger. She always said, if you get a house, make sure it has more than one bathroom. And in hindsight, that was actually probably one of the best advice I ever received, because one time one of my bathrooms broke and I had a second bathroom, which ended up working out. So yes, get a modest house. This isn't gonna be your dream house. You're not thinking about a dream house. You're thinking about being a real estate investor. So just go get a decent house. As long as it's livable, everything is up to code, you're gonna be fine. That's a good house if you can afford it. If the payments are less than what your lender is gonna quote you for a certain mortgage amount. If you can get it for less than that mortgage amount, like let's say he says or she says that you can only afford up to $2,500 a month in payments, but you find a decent house, a little house, because it is your first house, and it says that the payments are, once you do your math, the payments are like $1,500, get that house. Just make sure that whatever house you get, it has more than one room. Ideally, if you are starting out, get something with 2. I would say a 2-2 is a great way to start. And make sure that it doesn't have a whole lot of living space. So like 2 maybe 900 square feet, that's typically a good place to start. At least for me, the first house that I got, it was 896 square feet. It was a 1.5 townhome. And to this day, it is probably my strongest performing asset right now. Once you find a house, you want to make sure that you do whatever you have to do to close. So you're probably gonna hit some obstacles along the way. I've never really had a closing that went smooth. There was always some kind of issues along the way, but do whatever it is that you need to do to close. That means if you need to borrow money from a family member to help you with the down payment, or if you have the down payment but your debt to income ratio is a little too high, you could borrow the money from a family member to pay down the debt and then pay them off later. And borrowing money from a family member is you asking for a private loan, essentially. So that loan doesn't even go on your credit report, because you're just paying it to a family member on your trust. So if you have access to that, go ahead and do that. Your job is to close, find whatever means necessary to make sure that you acquire that first property. Also, before I forget, the first property that you buy, since you're a first-time home buyer, you're gonna wanna use an FHA loan. So this is gonna allow you to put 3.5% down instead of 15%, 20%, 30%, none of that crap. You'll be able to just buy your first property with 3.5, and 3.5 is not a whole lot of money. So you should be able to save that down payment relatively quick. Just know that you also have fees that are tied to that. Depending on where you are, they could be anywhere between 3.5 to about 5%. Typically, the average is somewhere between 4%. So probably you'll need whatever the purchase price is. Try and save about, I like going for 8%, because 8% gives me a little safety net in case something happens. Save about 8%. You'll probably use less of it for your first house. Step 4. Once you have the property, you finally closed, you went through the rigorous examinations and questions and all that crap that the lender is going to be making you go through, because underwriting sometimes can be a pain. But you succeeded. Now you go to step 4, and you're going to want to make sure that you maximize your investment. So once you close and you furnished your house, the very first thing that you're going to want to do now is rent out all the extra rooms. So if you bought a 3-bedroom, rent out the other 2 bedrooms. If you bought a 2-bedroom, rent out the spare bedroom. This will be the best thing that you can do, because it does a lot of things for you. So the first thing that it's going to do is going to help you save money, because now that money that person that you rented the room out to is paying you, you're going to put it directly in savings. You're not going to spend that money for anything. You're going to keep paying the mortgage as if nobody lives there with you. All the money your tenant gives you, put it away in savings. The other thing that you're going to want to keep doing is you're gonna want to keep working as if you're buying your first property still. Keep working, do not let up on the intensity. Keep picking up those extra overtime shifts. Keep working that side hustle, keep working that side job. You want to still keep making money. Once you paid money, or like once you bought that first property and you paid for the down payment and you depleted your savings, it's gonna be a lot easier to get that money back. Reason being is that now you have a tenant that's paying you money. You have your living expenses that are now being split again with somebody else. So the light bill, the internet, all of those bills, you can split them with your tenant, or you could just include it in the rent. But regardless, it's gonna make your expenses a whole lot cheaper. And once you're working and you're getting paid from the tenant, now you should be able to replenish your savings in probably a fraction of the time that it took you to get to whatever number it is that you got to buy the property in the first place. Step number 5. Now that you replenished your savings, it's time to start working on investment property number 2. So after you live in the property for 1 year, and this is how the rules are, you're allowed to buy a primary property for a 3.5% down payment, and that is on an FHA loan. You live there in that property for 1 year, and then you can convert that primary property that you're in into an investment property, and then go ahead and buy another primary property. The only thing is you're only allowed to have one FHA loan, which means the next property that you buy is going to be a primary residence, but you're going to buy it on a conventional loan, which is a 5% down payment. And 5% is only 1.5% more, so really doesn't matter. Go ahead and save another 8% or 9% for a down payment on the next property. Now, once you buy that next property, it can't just be any property. It has to be an upgrade from the property that you're leaving, because you need to justify why you're buying another primary home since you already have a primary home. And an upgrade can be anything. You just got to be creative. It could be more square footage, more rooms, a better zip code, a garage, a yard, anything. Just get creative. You just need a reason for why you're buying this next property. And here is where I would buy a slightly bigger property. Again, you don't want to upgrade too fast, because then you're gonna tie yourself down. So if the first property that you bought was a 2.1.5, like I did, the next one can be a 3.2, which is again what I did. So now that you have that 3.2, writing a letter to underwriting why that property is an upgrade is relatively easy, because all you got to say is, I need more room for whatever reason. That's it. Just make it up. Super easy letter. If you're buying a smaller property, now you got to get into more of the details. Like you got to make up some story, or, well, allegedly, you're not really making anything up. You just got to create a narrative. So real estate is more storytelling than anything. That's what I've come to learn, at least when you're getting the loans. At least in this step that I'm showing, that's kind of it's just storytelling at this point. So once you're ready for your second property, you're gonna go back and repeat steps 3 and 4. So you're gonna go back to your lender, ask for another pre-approval letter. You're gonna tell them that my first property, I want to turn it into an investment property. They're gonna tell you, they're gonna give you like a market comp as to what that rental property will rent for out on the market, and then they will use that as income. Hopefully it's income. Hopefully it's cash positive. You want to make sure that it's always cash positive, and then that income will be added to your total for the next property that you buy. So after repeating steps 3 and 4, which obviously means close by any means necessary, now you have your second property and you have rented out the new rooms. So let's say now you buy a 3.2 property. Instead of renting out 1 room, now you're going to rent out 2 rooms. And typically, at least for me, once you have a property and you rent out the 2 rooms, your living expenses dramatically decrease, because now all your living expenses are being cut in 3, and now you have 2 tenants that are paying you rent. So it becomes even easier to recover the money that you use to buy that second property, because now you have money from that first property that you bought and the 2 tenants. So I forgot about that first property. Step number 6, you rinse and repeat. You keep doing steps 3 and 4 over and over again until the bank will stop giving you a loan. Typically, you're allowed to have 1 FHA and you can have 10 conventional loans. However, the banks typically start questioning after 4 loans. So once you do this rinse and repeat 4 times, it starts getting a little bit more difficult to get another conventional loan, because now the banks most banks will start treating you as an investor, and they want you to put 15 to 20%, maybe 25% sometimes on a down payment before giving you a loan. There are ways in which you can go ahead and keep repeating this process, but again, it comes down to storytelling. Now it's not just I'm an investor. Now you need to have a much better reason for getting that next property. So after 4 properties, if you want the 5th, you're gonna have to say that you got married and your wife got pregnant, something like that. And by the way, the banks don't verify, but you want to make sure that it's something that you might be able to prove in your worst case scenario, because that could be considered fraud. But again, it's all storytelling, and it's all about your truth in this. But once you get to that level, just navigate carefully. Also, once you're there, you might be surprised to know that you're making a lot more money than you really think. So you might not even need to do all that. It might be more beneficial for you to actually go ahead and put in a 15-20% down payment on the next property, because it actually increases cash flow. And the name of the game is cash flow. So it makes things easier in the long term. So if you're there and you don't need to do all this creative stuff anymore, just go ahead and put 15-20%. It's a good investment in the long term. So some of the tips that I will give to you is, once you're scaling your portfolio, you want gradual upgrades. So you don't want to start off by buying a 2,000 square foot house with 4 bedrooms, because that means if you want to buy another property, you're going to need to make sure that it's more than a 2,000 square foot house that's a 4.2. So if you got a 4.2, 2,000 with a garage and a big yard, it's going to be very hard to justify that. Also, the fact that that's a bigger house, sometimes if it's in a better area, that means that the rent is probably gonna be a lot higher. And even though some people think better house, more rent equals more money, sometimes it can actually lead to less money, because that means that there's less people that actually want that house. That means that there's less people that can actually afford it. So ideally, for me, the way I use this step is I typically just get low houses on the lower end. So houses maybe 3.2, 1,200 square feet, 1,500 square feet. I get, like, those are the ones that I typically go for, because I can put them out on the market for a price that a lot of people can afford. It's a lot easier to rent a house that goes for $1,500 than it is to rent a house that goes for $2,500 or $3,000. You're gonna have a lot less candidates, which means you're gonna have more vacancies, and vacancies are not good. Try to do everything you can to avoid vacancies. The other advice that I'll give is, you're gonna wanna make sure that you have some money set aside as an emergency fund for unexpected expenses. Some repairs might end up being a lot more costly than others. And once you get profits, you're gonna wanna reinvest those profits. So if you put those profits back in the house, if that's something that you wanna do, go ahead and do it. Maybe you can add an addition, like if you have a house that was 3.2 and you wanna make it 4.2, you wanna add another bedroom to it, that's fine. That's gonna be more equity. It's never a bad thing. You can also just take that money and throw it into the S&P 500 or anything like that. Just don't leave that money just sitting in a savings account. I don't like doing that. I always like having a savings account with a certain number to cover expenses for the rental properties, and then anything over that, me personally, and this isn't financial advice, I just put it into the S&P. That's it. I don't go looking for individual stocks, just S&P, because Warren Buffett said so. And before I end this video, I want to give you guys some things to look out for, right? The first thing that you're going to want to do is you want to make sure that your house is cash flow, and you want to make sure that you study the market that you're in. Some markets, the property values are way too high and the rentals are being rented out at a much lower rate. So in this case, and a lot of markets are actually like this in today's economy, so I don't really think this strategy is that effective in many markets today. There are markets where it does work, and I've seen them. I'll give you an example, like Jacksonville, Florida. this could work there. Maybe in Ohio, some cities in Ohio, Cincinnati, or what's the other one? I can't think of the other one. I can't really think of Ohio. Anyways, there's nothing up there for me. But there are markets where this works, and there are a lot of markets. There's actually a lot more markets where it does not work, because the cost of owning a house, meaning your mortgage, insurance, and your taxes, they cost a whole lot more than if you were to put that same house on the market for rent. So your payments might be $2,500, but the market only dictates that the house can only be rented for about $2,000, $2,100. And if you try to give somebody a low-end house for $2,600 to try to make a profit, or even $2,500 to break even, they're just not gonna rent the house. They're just gonna go somewhere else. So always make sure that you study your market, make sure that you're aware of what rents are going for, make sure that you're aware of what the value of the properties are, and always try to find a deal that cash flows. If you do that math and you see that the property is cash flowing, then that's a really good deal. So go ahead and take it, because over time, your cash flow is only gonna go up on that property. But don't buy a property that's gonna make you go cash negative, because you're gonna have headaches, and trust me, I know from experience. The other thing you're gonna wanna look out for is the escrow. The first year when you buy the house, the payments are gonna look a certain way. The second year, it's gonna go up tremendously, because most likely your insurance is gonna go up, and your taxes are going to skyrocket, because the house is no longer going to be homestead. So once you buy the property as a primary, they calculate it as if it's going to be homestead, because they're thinking that that house is going to be your primary, right? Because it is your primary for a year. But if you do go get the house homestead, you'll be fine. But then you're going to lose the homestead on the first property, so the first property's taxes are going to skyrocket. So you want to make sure that you account for that. That's one of the big pitfalls for a lot of people. And the last thing, like I had said, always make sure that you have some money set aside for financial setbacks. If there is some kind of high maintenance and AC goes out and you have to replace it, just know that it's going to cost you $8,000. You can find some people for a house, especially since the houses that you're going to be owning here in the beginning are smaller. It's not going to be that expensive, maybe about like $5,000. I have one AC changed on a 1,300 square foot house for $4,000. Right now, I think the prices are about $4,500. Just understand how much expenses can be. So try and always get a feel for how much an AC replacement is going to cost you, or certain plumbing issues. It's always good to know this stuff, so you can have a good number set aside in case something happens. You're not wiped out, because if you're not ready and you don't have money set aside, you will be wiped out. So those are my 3 tips. It's cash flow, watch out for your escrow, and have money set aside. So hopefully you guys learned something from this video. If you did, leave a like, comment, anything. If you want to give me advice on anything that I got wrong or anything that I did right, I'll accept it, and I'll take that feedback, and hopefully I will learn from it.